Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Layla. Today I'm going to be talking about mistakes that I made in my medical school interviews that landed me in a position I didn't want to be in, which was applying a second time round. Thankfully I have secured my spot in medical school now, but I just wanted to kind of tell you about the experiences I had, the missteps, so that you don't make the same mistakes. Learn from me, use me as a tool. So I'm going to be going through my 4 biggest missteps, mistakes, things I'd do differently, and tell you a bit about each situation in context so that you kind of don't mess up where I did. So let's just jump in. So the first thing I want to mention is preparing for GMC related questions. And this relates only to if you're applying to medical school in the UK, because I don't really know what the system is over there that you would have to know about, but in the UK you have to know about the General Medical Council and their good medical practice guide, and all the advice I got before I went into the interview was read it. So that's all I did. I read it. I got to my first station in my first ever MMI interview, and the sheet outside the MMI read, all it said was, you're going to be read a quote from the GMC and then asked to discuss in further detail, and nothing else. So I didn't even know what the quote was that I was going to be read when I went in. Funnily enough, I was talking to everyone after the interview that was in my kind of cohort, and they all said that was the worst station, and I think that was probably a factor in my nerves and stuff in the following stations. So anyway, I went in and the interviewer said, okay, I'm gonna read your quote, and the quote was, doctors have a duty to protect and promote the health of the public. And I just kind of was like, yeah, so would you like to discuss that? Okay. And then he just didn't say anything. And so what I didn't do before the interview was read the GMC's information that's kind of up publicly and that people tell you to read before an interview critically, and like think about what kind of questions you could be asked related to it, because I just read it. I thought, are they going to ask if I'm like familiar with it? Have I read it? And I'd be able to kind of list off a couple of the things that are in it, but this was not that situation, and it was a 7-minute station where I was just left to talk. And I think what would have prepared me for that better, what I would do differently, what I did do differently, was to kind of think about talking points for those kind of things within the GMC manual, or at least get my head in a space where I could talk about it freely. So yeah, I mean, I was just completely stumped at that one. I was like, I mean, that's a given, is it not? A doctor's duty is to protect and promote the health of the public. Yes. And what came up in conversation later was, okay, do you think it's okay for doctors to smoke? For example, you know, if you think about going through the Good Medical Practice Guide with that kind of mindset of, well, what does this actually mean for doctors in their actual lives, then you'll probably be better placed for a circumstance like that, and it won't trip you up as much as it did me. So yeah, just read it critically, delve into the kind of implications behind what the core points are. You don't have to like go crazy with it, you know, you don't need to annotate it, it's not like that, but just have a think about it before you go into your interviews and you should be fine. Second thing, which I stated a minute ago, is not really knowing how to control my nerves. So I came out of that station knowing I had bombed it, knowing that it just wasn't a good station. If they were going to mark me out of 5, I would never have given myself more than like a 2, maybe a 3. Also in my head I was like, okay, but everyone else is going to have this station and I don't think it's something that the general public are ready for. I just got a bit down about myself. I was like, oh well, if I've already bombed that, that's only the first station, how am I going to do in the other 6? What's funny is how I manifest when I'm nervous. I get very like hyper. I start talking to everyone around me and I just can't shut up, and I was like kind of glugging my water and a bit like antsy, tiptoeing around, you know, standing outside the next station thinking this is the longest minute of my life to read a 2-line poster thing before I go into the next one. But I think I really hadn't calmed down my nerves, or adrenaline, let's call it adrenaline because it's better to frame it as adrenaline than nerves. The adrenaline was still pumping. I could have done a lot better had I spent that minute breathing slowly and kind of reaffirming the fact that I was ready to be there and that I was very competent. because when you come out of something like that, you are a bit taken aback and you don't really know how to deal with it. So yeah, managing my nerves was the second thing. I encourage you all to find ways to kind of calm your nerves in situations like that. It is very high pressure when you're doing your practice for interviews, regardless of how well rehearsed you are. You could be sitting talking in front of a mirror or with a friend who's pretending to be an interviewer, and you cannot replicate the intensity and the kind of pressure and the adrenaline that is pumping through your body at that moment. So definitely just find coping mechanisms. Shut up. Find ways to cope with your adrenaline. I probably will do a video at some point on kind of breathing techniques, because some of you might know this, many of you will not. I play French horn, so I was kind of raised in orchestras and brass bands and things like that, and very often we would spend unbelievable amounts of time on breathing techniques. I've been in quite a few ensembles, so I've picked up quite a few. They are just incredible for nerves. I just wish I had it in my head that that was what I was going to do in between the stations as soon as I'd kind of worked out what the next station was. Don't spend any time thinking about the last one and just move on. So that's my second tip. The third one I would say is handling role plays correctly. So the point of role plays, and something that I didn't pick up on at all until reflection, and actually I didn't even pick up on in my second round of applications, was the fact that with role plays, there's often more than one in an MMI. There's a reason for that, and I never thought about the fact that there's a reason for that. I just thought, oh well, they're just wanting to make sure that you can kind of communicate well and have empathy, and that's not always the point. So an example of one of my interviews, I went into the station and the situation was I was working in a care home part-time alongside my studies, and I'd noticed that one of my colleagues wasn't washing their hands and taking the hygiene measures seriously in between seeing patients or seeing service users, and I was to kind of talk to her about it. And what I had gotten from the preparation I had done through watching other people's videos and reading blogs and stuff like that was that in a role play you should never just jump down someone's throat. And in my head I was just thinking, okay, I need to keep the peace because it's a working environment and don't want it to be uncomfortable for anyone else. And I was like, you know, there could be any number of reasons she's neglecting to remember to kind of wash her hands properly. You know, maybe she's really stressed because of personal reasons. Maybe she's got like any number of things on her mind. So I thought, okay, I'll go in and I'll ask her a few questions and kind of see if she's okay in herself before I bring it up. But I spent about a minute, maybe two, just kind of laying down a bit of, you know, small talk, and I just kept getting from the actor, incredible actor by the way, you know, kudos to them, do you have a point? I am really busy, so if you've got something to say, just say it. So eventually I was just like, yeah, so I noticed that you've kind of been missing out some of the hygiene protocols. And she was like, are you trying to say something? Are you implying something about me? Are you saying that I'm dirty? You have to know how to act in high pressure situations like that. But what I missed when I was reading the paper was that it said you have to confront the situation, and that was the point of the station, not the whole kind of being empathetic. The point of it was doctors often have to be leaders. Sometimes that involves uncomfortable situations, therefore here's an uncomfortable situation we're going to put you in. Anyway, more on that in my roleplay video, going over all the tips and tricks I've got for roleplays in MMIs. So, you know, if that's something you want to watch, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and you'll get the notification when it comes out very soon. Just kind of think about the point of the roleplay. If you have a roleplay, it's not always about empathy. The fourth and final tip I have for you is to take a minute to think. And it seems like a given, and it's something that is always stressed when you're talking about going in to do an interview. Take a second to think about what you're going to say, and it's not something that I ever did. So I go into MMIs typically knowing I have a very limited amount of time, and I end up just kind of jumping on the first thought that comes into my head and rolling with that. And then a couple of sentences in, I'll be like, wait, I could have gone down a totally different path. An example of that was in one of my interviews last year. I was asked, what do you think is the most difficult part of a doctor's job? And you know, thinking about that later, I'm like, obviously it's very emotionally exhausting. You're often having to break really horrible news / you're around for really traumatic events. around you is going to be a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, a lot of death. That's not something I went for at all. The first thought that came into my head was, it's really difficult for doctors to kind of get the right information from patients and all the information that's relevant, because patients often don't know that something that seems irrelevant is actually a relevant like symptom or something like that. And I just remember thinking, like, what have I done? And they were like, right, but what is it that's so difficult about that? And they just kept asking what felt like to me the exact same question. And if I had taken a minute there to just kind of process the question and think about it, and not just be like, oh my god, 3 seconds have gone by, 4, 5, 6, oh my god, I've only got 5 minutes left. No, it's nothing like that. And you know, they're not trying to ask you as many questions as they possibly can in an interview. They just want to get an idea of your thought processes, and so if your thought processes are not very well thought out, it doesn't reflect very well. So yeah, just remember, you've got more time than you think. Very often we're feeling every single second in an MMI, and it's going a lot slower than you feel it to be going. Also, if you think about your answer before you say it, the likelihood is the things that you say will be a lot more cohesive, relevant, well thought out, succinct, everything. It will just be a much better answer. Just give it an extra like 5-10 seconds, honestly, and it makes all the difference, because the adrenaline will do wonders for you. Anyway, that is the end of my mistakes that I made during medical interviews video. If you liked it, please do give me a like, comment, subscribe, anything, all of them would be amazing. It really does help me out. I'll see you in the next one.